Everyone has a story. The automotive world is surrounded by some of the most passionate people on the planet. There's builders, collectors, and craftsmen who all have something to tell. Brad King, and this is Stories in Steel.
Car shows are very often the gateway to a lifelong interest in hot rods as a hobby, and for some, a career in the industry. On this episode of Stories in Steel, Brad sticks close to home in Apple Valley, California, and visits with Mike Jones of Exile Fabrications. As a kid, Mike would go to car shows with his grandparents. Later in life, this would inspire him to attend a trade school where he would learn the art of welding, from motorcycles and drag cars to off-road vehicles and full-on hot rod builds. Mike's talents and interests are far-reaching.
Sitting next to a pretty cool Project Lincoln, and a nice little Chevy pickup behind me that you put an LS in. So your deal's welding. That's kind of what your claim to fame is. Your fabrication welding abilities. So, what was the first thing? You picked up a welder on? What was the first thing you decided you were going to play with?
Back in high school, I started messing around with cars because both my grandpas had hot rods actually, but one of my grandpa was a builder. He'd build hot rods. So as kids, we went to car shows and rode with my grandpa to car shows, and so we were always in the car scene. But probably the first thing I actually picked up in a welder on was my Volkswagen Bug that I built I started building when I was in middle school, and picked up this Bug for a couple $100 when I was in middle school, and just started tinkering on it. And I wanted to learn how to weld, so I had a buddy that lived down the street that knew how to weld, and he built mini sprints and stuff. John Aiden,
okay.
John. Just started hanging out with him, and he taught me how to MIG weld, and I kind of would go after school and work for him, just help him out with stuff. And I brought my Volkswagen over to his house. I knew I wanted to bag it, put airbags on it, but I didn't really know how to weld. So I kind of built brackets for it and kind of did a little trade deal. He would weld on the car for me if I would help him for the day, Became buddies and just started welding on that thing. And that was kind of my first welding project, welding on that Volkswagen.
Started MIG welding.
Yeah, that was many years ago, but that was my first welding job.
So this is good. See, I didn't know grandfather got you into cars. He was the one that ruined you. So this is good.
Yeah.
This is good that grandpa was your bad influence.
When we were little kids, me and my brother, grandma would meet us there later, but my grandpa had a 1940 Ford convertible. Very beautiful car, and we'd load up in that thing and we'd go to all kinds of car shows, and we just hang out with Papa all day, and walk around, look at cars, and so I think he had a big part, and seeing him, we'd go stay at my grandparents a lot, spend the night and for summer break, and he'd be out there building his hot rods. It was just as kids, we were just around that a lot, me and my brother.
That was your influence.
Yeah, big influence on wanting to do what I do,
Right.
And he still, today, restores cars. So every time we get together, we always talk hot rods and cars. And
after you got done working with John, working on the mini sprints and helping build those, you were welding Harley frames.
Yeah, so that's where I learned I wanted to learn how to TIG weld.
Okay.
So I was to a point in my building trucks, the mini trucking scene. I really wanted to learn how to TIG weld. There's a couple people I knew how to weld. So I would go ask them, hey, but I would see their TIG welds and I was like, well, I guess I better go to school, So, because at this time I had a day job just changing oil out of Goodyear, and then I would like bag trucks and stuff, you know, on the evenings and on the weekends. And so I had like 2 jobs. So I went to Victor Valley College to learn how to TIG weld. So I just took their TIG class. Before I was even done with the class, because I picked it up pretty quick, you know. Before I was even done with the class, I got a job at Daytech Motorcycles, because I hated my job during the day, you know, doing oil changes and stuff. So I was like, man, I want to get a welding job, but I don't want a MIG welding job, you know. I want to get a TIG welding job. So as far as up here in the high desert, if you wanted to be a welder, that was like the place.
That was the pinnacle.
That was
yes.
the place to go. If you were a TIG welder at Daytech, you pretty much made it in the high desert as far as a welder, you know. I wasn't done with school yet, and I was like, well, I might as well go apply. So I did. I went and applied and took a welding test, passed. They put me on nights, and I just remember everyone in the welding class was like super jealous that I already had a welding job. And my teacher, I was like the poster boy, you know, like, look at this guy. He already got a welding job, and he's not even done with school yet. And so, yeah, that's what I did. So I think I honed my skills for TIG welding because I was already a fabricator. You know, I was obviously still learning and stuff, but I went and worked for Daytech, welded every day, all day.
That's how you fine tune your art, right?
Yeah.
There is
so
repetition.
I just kind of kept moving up at Daytech until I was one of the highest welding positions you can get there was step 1 on frames. That's what everyone wanted to do. So I worked there for a few years, and then the economy kind of hit, you know. Then it's just layoffs and layoffs and layoffs, and eventually it got down to just me and my boss, and someone's got to go, you know.
Yeah.
So they're pretty much go to day shift or you're out. And actually at that time had another job lined up working for Rob Lindsay. And I was like, well, I think this is where my road ends here, because I'm going to go work at a race car shop, you know? So, because I was just kind of transitioning at that time from mini truck stuff kind of into more serious kind of car builds, you know? And then when Daytech had the layoff thing hit, I called Rob and said, hey, do you want me full time, you know? Because I'm about to not have a job. He's like, yeah. So I went and worked for him, and I learned a lot over there, learned a lot from that guy, and became his main guy for, you know, some years. The economy thing kind of hit again, and I had to venture off and went and worked at an off-road shop. And when I worked for him, I was, you know, pretty good at TIG welding already. And I don't think at that time, he didn't TIG weld stuff a lot there. So he got like a new machine, and so then we started TIG welding everything, you know. And then it was cool because I was like, man, working in a shop, you know, TIG welding and fabricating. And I was still doing my thing like at night, you know, at the house, because I always had my little shop in my garage.
Right.
And then when I quit working for him and I was working for an off-road shop, I learned a lot there too. And I was already kind of into the off-road stuff, you know, because we did some off-road stuff at Rob's shop. And then I learned a lot at this other off-road shop. And after working there for a while, I was like, man, it's kind of time to go out on my own, you know?
What got you into the off-road
Well,
deal?
Before I got into off-road stuff, I wasn't really into the hot rod stuff right out of the gate, you know? I kind of more into lowrider stuff because I built that Volkswagen.
Right.
And it was slammed on the airbags and all that. That kind of took me into the mini trucking scene because we started going to those kind of shows with my Volkswagen. Then I was like, man, these trucks are cool, you know, all laying on the ground. And so I wanted to build a truck. I had a bunch of problems with my Volkswagen, actually, and I was just sick of the thing. And my stepdad bought me a Toyota Tacoma. And I remember he told me, he's like, I'll only buy this thing if you don't lower it. And I was like, oh, all right.
Cross your fingers behind your bag.
Knew in the back of my head I was going to do it anyways, you know. So I actually took that truck pretty much brand new and hacked that thing to bits. And then bagged it and body dropped it and put on 20s. And, you know, way back in those days, it was a 2000 Toyota Tacoma. I'm not sure exactly what year it was when I bagged it, but it was still a new truck, you know, pretty new truck. Right. So when we would go take the thing to car shows, it was the only body dropped Tacoma on 20-inch wheels. Back then 20-inch wheels was pretty big, that
So
now it's different.
What did Grandpa say about that? Did he give you a bad time or
No, he thought it was cool. I don't know. Maybe he didn't. He said,
didn't want to hurt your
he said it was cool anyways. But no, I mean, there was still a lot of fabrication on it. But back then I was still just MIG welding everything. And what got me in the off-road stuff is I think seeing all the off-road cars, even when I was still in the mini truck stuff, I was still into a lot more advanced in the fabrication. I wanted to I liked the mechanical stuff, how all the plate work and, all the bracing and the tubing and just how stuff was built in the off-road industry. I just really liked how that's appealing to me,
Right.
So I actually got into off-road stuff because my cousin, he was into rock crawling, and he always had Jeeps and buggies that he'd always bring over to me and needed just some work done on them, random miscellaneous stuff. And we ended up building King of the Hammers buggy for my cousin. And it took us a couple years to build it, but I think we got it done in 2010. Then ever since then, taking a car to King of the Hammers, and that was before Ultra 4 was Ultra 4, was just when it was just King of the Hammers. It was just the only race,
You just showed up with something.
We showed up with something that was, a lot different than the other buggies out there, because a lot of the other people's buggies were just like rock crawlers. They kind of converted to a desert type car. But at that time, I already worked for a couple off-road shops. So my buggy looked like a desert car, and a lot of plate work and bulkheads on all the suspension points, and everything was TIG welded. And back then, when King of the Hammer stuff was still real small, I think we brought a pretty cool looking car out there, And then ever since then, it was just every year we were building a car for somebody. And then just kind of that's what got me stuck in the off-road stuff, was building the first King of the Hammers car. Because I already had my shop at my house, and I had jobs lined up, we already built that King of the Hammers car. And so I was already getting busy. So I was just to a point where I kind of needed to go off on my own, just take that extra step, And then, so that's what I did. Went out on my own and started my own business. So full time.
What do you want to build now? What is you've done the hammer stuff? Now what would be your next goal of what do you want to do?
Well, I've done a lot of the off-road stuff, and I love it. I really do. I love the fabrication. I love what they do. Making the cars work, making them perform. I love it. But I went from that mini trucking scene. I kind of hit the hot rod scene, but I got so busy with the off-road stuff, I kind of just started kind of booting the custom car guys out, and that's kind of where I'm from, is like the custom cars. That's where I started, but I never got to the point where I could start building like these kind of cars, So I think like next year I really want to focus on like the off-road stuff. Yeah, it comes, that's great, but we've got to line up some pretty extreme custom car builds here that I'm really excited about for next year. I think that's kind of where we're going,
Right.
Is I'm gonna take kind of that style of the race car off-road, everything TIG welded, super nice, and kind of put it towards some of our custom street car builds that we're doing.
Well, this Lincoln is a prime example. It's some crazy little suspension work and framework that's already kind of going.
Yeah, it's kind of come together. We got a pretty crazy build plan for it, but yeah, that car's gonna be wild. It's gonna be a full tube chassis Lincoln, which when have you seen one of those?
Right.
People just don't do that to that type of car, But yeah, we're putting a twin turbo LS motor in it and L80E trans full manual. Just gonna be all tin floors, open the trunk, be all Zeus fastened tins like a race car.
4-door hot rod.
Yeah, so it's gonna be a big boat that's not as heavy as it used to be, but it's gonna spin some big wide donuts, So it's gonna be a fun car. It's gonna be a roll cage, and it's gonna be a wild car. But so doing jobs like that, it's going to be taking out all the because I specialize in suspension setup and design, so we're going to take all the stuff that I've learned over the number of years and just try and put it into these type of vehicles that I don't have a crew of guys,
Right.
It's just me, and every once in a while I'll get a helper that can help me out and get some stuff, squared away. But for the most part, I'm the one that builds these cars from the ground up, turnkey done. So it takes me a little bit longer than some of the other shops to compete with, This car, we got about a year. I want to get this one done. So I'm really excited about it.
As long as they keep writing the checks, that's what it takes. Just
Yeah.
gotta keep feeding it money like any other car project.
Yeah.
I've been in here a few times when you were doing your plasma cutting parts over there. Not everybody has the wazoo plasma cutter to make the pieces they need to make. Has that been a big help with what you do when you're building?
Oh yeah. I mean, we're all these years I've been building cars. I don't really like to hand cut all my parts. I want them all laser and precise, and and plus hand cutting. By the time you hand cut parts, you're not gonna make no money on building a car. Because you want to do what you love, but you also need to make money. So I would old fashioned make stuff out of template paper and send it off to laser cutter. But the problem is when you're building something, custom, you can only build some of the parts out of template paper, but you need the real parts to start building other parts.
Right.
So you would bring half of all the stuff you need to the laser cutter, have to wait weeks, get those parts back, tack them up, now make the rest of your templates and take those back. So by the time you have this big pivot box assembly for, say, an off-road car or a bulkhead assembly that you're kind of making custom because, you don't draw a whole car in CAD, you're building it freestyle. I mean, you're 2 months into this bracket assembly.
But see, now you've gone from the cardboard templates to having to learn the computer.
Yeah.
So how are you doing with that?
Well, I was to the point where I just was tired of waiting and customers getting mad because you're waiting and waiting for parts. So me and my wife sat down and what can we do to get, our own equipment? So we decided to get, we got a big CNC plaza table and press brakes. We can build everything. And and that was one of the big things is it going to be, what's this learning curve going to be to learn CAD and learn programming? And because, I've always just kind of visualized a car. We kind of do some sketching on graph paper, kind of get scale stuff down and start designing suspension on graph paper. And, but then once you kind of have your base points of your measurements, we would just literally set, motor and transmission up on the chassis table and set your rear axle up and all your front suspension all at full bump and start building seats and start building up, just with your vision that you kind of have from paper. And so I was concerned about getting this equipment, and you get the equipment, but then you got to learn how to use it.
Well, you got to pay for it too.
Yeah. So it honestly, as far as learning the CNC machine, it wasn't that hard. It took the first day I got the thing all set up, I was already cutting parts. But I think the biggest hurdle is the actual, when you're just doing like flat tabs, I still work in a way I used to where I make templates. If I make a template in my shop now, it's just so much easier where I can just recreate that template in CAD, draw it, cut it, bend it up, But I'm still learning drawing in 3D, and that's a huge part. Like some of these guys that can draw CAD, draw a full functioning off-road car, that cyclist suspension. There's a lot to learn there, But as far as I am still learning that. As far as what I do, I've come from just fabricating and building kind of. I think of these styles in my head, because we build a lot of these off-road buggies, and a lot of people ask, like, what program do you use, And for me, it's just in my brain. I just draw it up in paper, and I just think I have a good vision of what looks cool, you know. So we'll just go for it and build it. But it's definitely just a huge advantage having the equipment in your shop, because you can go from waiting weeks and weeks and weeks for parts to that whole assembly. I can have it all designed and tacked up in one day. Now customers, you know, there's no excuse.
Well, now it's just how fast can you draw it and how fast can you cut it out. It's not, you're not waiting except for you.
Yeah.
Now it's just a one-man show is now the issue.
And the cool thing too is having the equipment in the shop. I mean, I don't really advertise that I do it, but I do cut for some other people, and you know, you can make some money there too, you know. So there's different areas to make money now, you know, with having the equipment in your shop.
Right.
But yeah, it's really nice. So it's just the CAD programming there's a lot to learn there with as far as drawing and cycling, suspension, like all in 3D, you know. There's still a lot to learn there, but it has definitely made a huge difference in building cars.
Now, I was watching your boys earlier. You built them. I mean, most kids when I was younger, you know, just a go-kart or a mini bike, that was pretty cool. You made this insane off-road go-kart thing for your boys.
Yeah.
And they're out playing it. Do they want to do what Dad does? I mean, do they come out and do they want any part of this, or is this anything that they really care about?
Yeah, you know what? They actually do. My kids aren't, as you can, you know, saw when we were out there running around. They're not the most daring, you know, but no, they love to be in the shop. Cash, my youngest, I work at night a lot. You know, I'll work late hours, and since my shop's at the house, you know, I'll go in for dinner and, you know, help get the kids ready for bed, and I'm gonna go back out in the shop. My youngest, Cash, he is so adamant about wanting to come out here with me all the time at night. He's like, he'll get up and say, okay, well, I'm gonna go out with Dad. And my wife's like, no, you have school tomorrow. You have to go to bed. And but he's just so much wanting to come out here and help. And they do, you know. It's funny because I always tell them, like, yeah, you want to come out in the shop? Let's help me clean. And they don't want to do that. They want to build something. So, but yeah, they definitely do. And when you ask the boys, if you ask them, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? They said they want to work in the shop, Dad. So they're still young. They are definitely in the shop, and they come out and hang out and learn. And I teach them stuff. And ever since Asher was little, when I had the big shop, he would come out and watch me weld, and you know, they still watch me weld sometimes. And Asher has actually welded with a MIG welder, you know, just messing around.
So he's learning. I mean,
yeah. There's days where they don't want to, but I mean, they're kids, you know. So, but yeah, we built that little car. I was just gonna build him a go-kart, just a regular run on the muck. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So I was like, okay, how can I build something cool with suspension and not go crazy on, you know, what I got to put into it? And so
you went crazy. I think you went against your deal there.
A little bit. I mean, I didn't go crazy with like the shocks, and I got some cheap shocks, but yeah, I wanted to build like a scaled down. Like if you take a picture of that car, I didn't really want you to be able to tell if it was a small car. And I think I did pretty good. Yeah. You know, it's pretty scaled. I could use a little bit bigger tires, but we had to kind of fudge that because, you know, the torque converter we were using and stuff. I didn't want to be too bogged down. So, but yeah, it's a cool little car. But I wish they'd be a little more daring, but they get it, you know.
They're still young.
Yeah. And then when we have right now our Razor's down, but like when we go tool around in the Razor and stuff, he likes to follow me and go out in the desert and stuff. So, but he likes to do that more than run around the yard, you know.
Well, eventually he's going to go, I don't want Dad to beat me, so you're going to have to put a bigger motor in that thing so he can...
Well, the original plan was, because he's already, I mean, that car, I built it all adjustable. Like the pedals go forward, the seat goes back, it's maxed out. And with a helmet on, his head's about hitting the roof now, you know.
Build another car.
Well, yeah, that was the whole thing, is we wanted to build another car, but what? Do we build another go-kart, or do we build something a little more serious, you know? So I don't know, maybe kind of lost.
Well, you can always go racing. I mean, it'd just be fun to just build something like just a bigger scale, kind of like the Razor or something. You can go and just beat up and have fun.
So I don't know what we're gonna do next with the kids, but their plan was to build something bigger for Asher that he can grow into as a teen, you know, and then Cash, the youngest, would have that little car, but he's not really interested in driving it right now. So, what do you do?
So I've seen a lot of the mini trucks. You actually did some stuff for my friend Alex. You did a nice little project for him on his 55 Chevy pickup truck.
Mm-hmm.
Some cool fab work. What is the craziest thing you've been involved in? As far as that you just thought that was just an absolute over the top nuts project.
The last off-road car I just built, the one for Chris, Gardner owns Maximum Transmission. That car's pretty wild, you know. I mean, it's hard because I'd say as far as fabrication, that's probably the most involved car I've done so far, because we did a lot. I mean, that car's got a lot of fabrication on it, you know. And but I don't know. I mean, I think as far as the wildest, like kind of out of it's going to be this Lincoln, because it's, you know, I mean, when have you seen a twin turboed, laid out full chassis, 1,500 horsepower Lincoln with 22 by 15 inch wide tires in the back, you know? So, and we're doing, you know, we're not doing the typical airbag, except we're doing the hydro shocks. So you'll still be riding on coilovers, but be able to go all the way down. And it's just going to be a loud, wild, insane car, you know? I mean, that's probably going to be the craziest as far as out of the box, you know? But the race car stuff, I think that's probably the most involved is in fabrication wise. The mini truck stuff, I mean, it got to a point where I was redoing my Tacoma. I sold the old frame, sold the old bed. We pretty much built another truck for a guy with all my old stuff. So it looked like my old truck going on the road, but it wasn't. And then I built that truck into a full chassis truck, and that started to go pretty wild. We did crazy rear cantilever suspension, centrifugal supercharged small block Chevy. We caged it, all custom spindles, arms, the whole bit, you know. But it got to the point where it was a full roller chassis. It needed tin work and, you know, needed to be finished. And I was just like, I'm not into it no more. You know, I was into the off-road stuff at that point already, building off-road cars. I had this Tacoma that was so wild, and I was just like, what am I building this for? I'd rather build off-road cars, you know? So I sold it. I sold it for nothing. I sold that thing for the price of rod ends, and I just want to get rid of it that bad.
Well, just now you want a challenge. There's always a challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how you do things. You're always looking for a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, that was done. Now you go on to the next thing.
Yeah, and that was the next thing. After that, it just was full-blown off-road shop, you know, with occasional hot rod and drag car stuff. I still did, you know, roll cages and a lot of Jeeps and, you know, four-wheel drive stuff. And in the mix, every once in a while, hot rod guy would come in with something, you know. But yeah, I think this Lincoln's going to be the wildest car I've done, just because it's something that no one's done. You know, the Ultra 4 stuff, all those buggies, the buggies I've built, they're all nice cars, but it's not like it's something nobody's done. They're all basically the same concept, you know, big trailing arms and, you know, super beefy axles and beefy chassis. And the big thing that got into this year or last year got real big was all the cars come in, they're all independent front suspension, four-wheel drive now. So that's been a big thing. We were thinking about doing it, but at that time, none of the parts were holding up. You know, every time you go out to King of the Hammers, those cars would break. But now they've gotten figured out where the parts are been holding up. So I did want to build one of those, but the last car we did was still straight axle. But it was a wild car still, you know.
So you just want to start doing out of the box.
Well, if someone's got the money for it.
It's still matters somebody writing checks. Yes,
yeah.
That's always going to be the
And
issue.
we got a cool project we're just starting on for the shop, building a shop truck, a 65C10.
Okay.
Not going to go crazy out of the box on it, but we are doing a couple really cool things on it, you know, like 180-degree headers and, you know, really, really cool suspension setup. So it's going to be something that you don't it's not out of the box, but it's not something you typically see on that type of car, you know?
Right.
So I am really excited about that. That's going to be really cool.
You've got the plasma cutter, you've got the press brake, which is pretty slick. Is there any other tooling that you would like to acquire that works with what you need? I mean, you're still kind of a bare bones shop in a lot of areas. Is there other things that you'd like to add to your arsenal?
Yeah, I mean, of course. You know, I mean, I'm limited on my space. You know, right now we're wanting to push out the shop a little bit, but I've worked so long without even like a 2-post lift. You know, just like when you do exhaust systems, like I'm still old school, man. Just lay on the ground, get it up and down 500 times. You know, build custom, mandrel band exhaust, and that's just what it is. You know, there's some things you just, I would love to have a laser cutter, but plasma table, the thing cuts pretty nice. But nothing beats a laser. But that's just not gonna happen. I think for me, one big thing I would really like to upgrade is my press brake. It's full hydraulic, really nice, but it's old school. It's got a manual backstop. I modified it and put a digital readout on it so it's accurate. But to have like a CNC press brake would be cool, because then you can really bend parts quicker and really follow your CAD drawing a lot better than producing this really precise CAD drawing and then bringing it over to your old school press brake. And 10 thousandths on a bend makes it fit or not fit when you're folding parts and with inner pieces interlocking. And so 10 thousandths off on a bend would make it not fit. So there is some areas where it's really nice being able to bend up all your own parts with your tooling and your big press brake, but when you're bending stuff that's so accurate, it has to fit so tight for TIG welding tolerances, it would be nice to have like a CNC press brake. And of course there's all kinds of tools I'd like to have, but I mean,
just acquire them as you get older.
Yeah,
part of the deal.
Just acquire it. Yeah, I mean, I worked for years and years with just a regular big bandsaw that cuts straight. Then you got your chop saw to cut all your angles. But I remember a couple years ago getting that big mitering bandsaw was just like money, So yeah, I mean, every time you get a new tool, I'm super excited about it and just want to use it, and it makes life easier in the shop. Definitely some tools I want to get. One of the things I do want to get though, I do want to get a 2-post lift, and they're not even expensive. It's just the amount of having room for it, because when you don't need it, it's totally in your way. Yep. Like this bay right here, if I put a 2-post lift here, if I'm not using it for a lift, the lift is totally in my way, So yeah, once we bumped the shop out, because with getting that equipment, it took up a lot of room, right. With a big CNC plasma table and big press brake. So once we bumped the shop out, we add a couple thousand square feet to it, then I definitely would get some more tooling in here. When I started doing off-road stuff, a lot of people would do just like weld washers. Like, you have a 3/16 tab, right, for your 4-link brackets or whatever. A lot of people will just weld a washer on there to make it thicker for the bolt to ride on, so it's less likely to wear out, right? When I built my very first off-road car, I was real intrigued by that because I thought it looked really cool with the weld going around. So I was like, well, it'd be really cool just to make that whole tab, but just shrink it down an 1/8 inch around and put a cool design in the middle of it and weld it around and weld all on the inside, Man, so every off-road car I ever built from the very beginning and when I started building those off-road cars is I wouldn't just do weld wash, I'd do like a full doubler plate, with triangulation cutouts in the middle and weld it all in there. And I'm sure there was other people doing it. I'm sure I didn't invent it, But at that time, I never really saw people doing it, because I remember when we would post like builds on Pirate 4x4 with like the off-road cars, there was a lot of people who were saying like, why don't just put a weld washer? Well, it seems like a lot of wasted weld. It looks really cool.
Burning up rod, yeah. I think it's cool.
It's a piece of art, make it look cool, So I think that was and yeah, it's funny because that you say that about you did start seeing a lot of it, because I feel like the same way too, but you don't really want to say it, like, man, I was doing that, you know?
It's my idea.
So, I mean, there was a lot of cars that, you know, because it's hard because if you come out with a cool idea or you build something really nice and then you show it off all over online or at shows, it's not done yet. I mean, everyone's gonna, if someone sees something they like, they're gonna copy you, you know? I mean, that's just the industry. Yeah, I feel that I did kind of bring that more or less than some other people did, you know, as far as with the doubler plates and all the real pretty welds and everything going around the whole tab instead of just like a weld washer. And so I kind of brought that into the street car stuff too. You know, whenever we do 4-link brackets or anything, even in these type of cars, I'll do that. I'll do all the tabs doubled, and I just do what I do because I not only am just a welder, you know, I'll build the whole car. We'll plumb it, we'll wire it, fire it. Pretty much the only thing I don't do on the cars is paint it or do the interior work, you know. We'll do all final assembly, everything. So I think that it's cool because it's not, I've learned a lot through all the years where I can build a complete vehicle, you know. So, but I'm always thinking of stuff. I'm always thinking about cool knick-knack brackets or, you know, what would make my life easier. So one big thing for me was when I got my equipment, I always want to build something for my toolbox. So I actually designed these really cool aluminum wrench racks and ratchet organizers and drawer organizers, but they're all dimple dyed and triangulation cuts through them. They're all aluminum. And so I kind of got into that for a while when I first got my equipment, putting up online. I sold a lot of them. I mean, I sold a lot of that stuff, but I just don't really sell a lot of it anymore because I just got so busy with cars and, you know, cutting brackets for other people. But yeah, I always like doing stuff. I'm always thinking of something to cut or make, or, you know,
Right.
something a little different that you don't typically see. So my toolbox looks really cool inside.
Well, thank you, Mike, for telling us a little bit about your life.
Yeah, sure is a lot more, but
No, it's
I can't
very,
remember
very
it all.
interesting stuff. It only gets worse as you get older.
yeah.
Exile Mike. For crying out loud. Exile Mike. This episode has 112% more sparks, where the metal meets the other metal. So, do you have to use a Lincoln welder on the Lincoln? But I want to look at the flash. Well, it's a little known fact then. I mean, that welding was in fact invented in 1954, June to be exact, by Otto McTowski of Detroit, Michigan. Proudly celebrating our 250th outtake. I don't care how he likes it. I'm pronouncing it Hone. Here on Mike episode, it's Jones. Jeez, Jones 4. I'm done. Did you just say enunciate? I can't wait until we have more sponsors and we can get a real voiceover guy. A big shout out once again to the person typing in the closed captions. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Yeah, I'll have a hot pastrami, and Brad will have the club sandwich because he wore his members only jacket today. Honestly, I've never seen a rash manifest that quickly. It's only episode 4, but it feels like 40. I can't imagine that Mike Rowe has to do this many takes. Yeah, I believe it was Socrates who said, if you think you can do what I do better, why don't you go... When does the horn section get here?